Hi there everyone. For this video I'm going to extend some of the work I've done in Excel on how to map data and show another way to pull up and visualize smaller units of analysis. Primarily this one's going to be block group, but a lot of times block group and tracts are used as neighborhoods or communities within cities to do some type of analysis. Up to this point it's been difficult to kind of work with those units in Excel, but some of the newer versions of Excel give you the option to bring in custom regions. With that, you need a shape or a KML file that's often used with Google. With that, I'm going to go over a way to do that with a specific data set where you see in front of you from the EPA, referred to as the EnviroAtlas. I thought this is a pretty cool data set that gets away from all of the crime-based data that I've looked at before, but has some really cool data for the nation as a whole, but also within certain communities. I have it up on another tab, has additional measures available at the block group level. One of those I've done some work in related to opioid use that I'll pull up. But with that, I just want to look and kind of demonstrate how you can pull up other types of data at the tract or block group in Excel. You can still look at neighborhood variation, display it, change the maps, and make final products to display variation. Similar to like you would do with social data from, say, the American Community Survey, Social Explorer, whatever you're pulling data from, you can actually pull other data sets and bring them together. I'll also be making a video here in the near future on if you have address level data lat and long and you want to get the tract or block group ID, so the specific unique ID that point falls within, we'll be able to do that. Then we can aggregate up so you would have an account at least based on the neighborhood. Then you can construct rates or percentages based on what you're trying to do. But with that, let's get started today. Alright, so here you can see I just have the website pulled up. I've looked at this data off and on for a few years, but I haven't sat down to do much with it, just given time allotments and everything. I recommend spend some time, go through it. It's pretty cool in terms of what data has available, the working books, the code books, everything with it. This is a cool site to go through and kind of just go through have a big interactive side of it as well. Like I said, they have communities within the United States that have smaller units or specific measures at those cities. You can see here kind of where some are completed, underdeveloped, or under development, sorry about that. But I recommend if you do work in some of these areas, take a look at it. It's pretty cool to incorporate this type of data. And that's what I did today. This gives a good background on it. The interactive map, you can go ahead and visualize and use tools like a lot of other websites that give you interactive mapping capabilities. This is similar to that. But with that, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I highly recommend, if you're really interested in it, download it, use the interactive maps, see what it offers. But it has quite a few different data available at the national level, so across the entire US. And then for the specific communities that it's already developed, more in-depth ones for those specific. And that's what we're going to focus on today. The main part is for the communities that you want to look into is find the one that you're looking at. Specifically here it gives you, I already did a basic form where it's just enter name, affiliation, not even name, email, affiliation, and what do you want to use the data for. So nothing too crazy, and it brings you right to the download page. I knew what I wanted to look at already, so I scrolled down and went to the community data because I wanted to work specifically within Birmingham. So I've done some work here with a graduate student based on drug overdose, looking at neighborhood characteristics and also pharmacies and the built environment as a whole. I'll link these to the YouTube video if you're interested in taking a look at these. But it also got me thinking, especially this weekend when I was looking at my Google Scholar and an article popped up, notification. So it got me thinking about the effect of vacant lots and remediating those vacant lots and nearby land use and how that impacts crime. But more broadly, we can look at this in a number of different fashions. Crime's not the only outcome that we have to look at when it comes to green space or greening or anything that comes to that. So I wanted to take a much more broader health approach to this. Yes, greening is an important part and it's been studied heavily in Philadelphia over the years, but this is a pretty cool way that you could examine the effect of green space on a number of different outcomes. And this data has a number of those itself. That's why I say I recommend going through the code book, the tree cover, the oxygen levels, everything with that. We'll get into one of those examples today, but fairly straightforward. You can see here that the options you have to download different files itself, like I said, take a look at them, pretty cool. I already went ahead and downloaded the CSV with shapefile here. That's because I wanted to pull it up in ArcPro just to see what it looked like, but it also gives me CSV files that I can open in Excel and then convert to a workbook and just work from that and map within that. And that's what we're going to be doing today. So with that, I'm just going to minimize this and I'm going to pull up ArcPro so you can see what the block groups look like in Birmingham already. When you download this, similar to other files, it comes down in a zipped one. So all I did was unzip it, and I have the files here. I went ahead and downloaded another code book just to go through it. But when you go into it, you can see it has a number of files within it, the CSVs, which correspond with the overall code book, and also has the shape files with corresponding ones similar to that. For our purposes, and we're not going to get into the very different ones, I just wanted to bring it up within ArcPro to show you what it's looking like and how it's going to then connect and merge as a custom region within Excel. I say this because it took me a little while to figure out why it wasn't working properly when I was doing some work in Arkansas, and then after just troubleshooting, I did end up finding how it works and kind of the straightforward process it is. I was just overlooking a small little factor of it. So with that, you can see here all of the CSV files, and they have corresponding values to them. I'm going to go ahead and open one of the workbooks that has that information in it. So here you can see the community, and it kind of gives the bottom part to it. I like the descriptive part because it kind of tells you what it is, the availability in the city, and the overall what it refers to. So given what I just mentioned, I was interested in kind of the clean air respiratory side of it. So I wanted to look at the acute respiratory symptoms avoided due to ozone removed by tree cover. So cases per year. It gives a nice description. And then if you scroll along, it gives you a good idea of what table it's in, so the CSV file within here, so we know which one it's in. And then it also gives you your field name, so that's going to be your variable name as well. The last time it was updated, so here we see 2010. If we scroll down, you have different levels, and the last time it was updated. Some are even in 2019, 2020, so it just depends on what measure you're looking for. For now, though, we're just going to concentrate on this top one here, looking at acute respiratory symptoms within Birmingham. So here you can see, not surprisingly, population kind of refers to that, but the one that we're looking for is the bin map. So if we were to open this, and I already have it open, so I'm just going to move it over so you can see it. Oops. And if you notice, this is the first video I've done with the Office 365. I had the 2016 last updated one. So I also updated that. So if you're seeing some differences within my screen here, that's probably what you're seeing. And I just turned it black versus gray. But here's the measure we're looking for. So remember, this is cases per year that's avoided based on the tree cover from an acute respiratory standpoint. So with that, this is really the only measure that we're interested in looking at this point. So we can copy this over. And with that, we still need the unique ID. For this, it's the block group. So I'm going to go to the end here. I think it's at the end. This one might be at the beginning. And also control, yeah, there we go, block group. So I highlighted both of those. I copied them. And I'm just going to go into the second sheet here and hit paste. So now I have these two specifically. If you notice though, and I haven't done it yet, I need to save this as a workbook versus a CSV, so it'll allow me to insert the 3D mapping capability. So really just go back to save as. I'm going to change this to a workbook. Keep it the same name. I don't really want to change much, but at the end, just the purpose of this, I'm going to use it as the example. So now we have our workbook here. We have our block group, so we're good to go. And I say that if you remember correctly when we're looking at FIPS code, so this is the unique ID. Alabama being the first state alphabetically is 01. As you can see here, we're already missing the leading 0, which is a pain. But we know that just by looking at it. So that's what might, if you try to do this straight away, might slip you up. It's not going to have the exact same unique ID as the shape file, our boundary file that we want to visualize this data with. Create some issues. So with that, I'm going to open up the ArcPro, and this lets you see what I'm referring to. So all I did was bring in the block group file for Birmingham. And if I zoom in, you can see specific ones and kind of the outline of Birmingham. If you're familiar with the area, I have not been there, so I'm not as familiar as maybe some of you. But each one of these is a unique block group. I just made it an outline so you can see where it is within ArcPro. With that, I did open the attribute table down here, so you can see that for the block group number, there is a leading 0, and we're missing that in the Excel workbook. And that's important because if you try to merge these, it's not going to recognize them as the same, so you're not going to be able to display the data or anything with that. Another key part for the data that you're working with, if you've already projected it, you're going to be in some issues, and this is much more of a spatial, if you're familiar with spatial files. You typically, and for Excel, you need to leave it in a normal format that most of the data automatically downloads in the WGS 84, I believe it is. So keep that in mind. If you've projected data, you might have some issues trying to pull it up when it comes to Excel. And with that, you might notice when I'm moving around, you can see coordinates changing down here. So you can see this is actually projected data. So it becomes problematic, and you actually do need to use it in a World Geographic System itself. So with that, I'm going to hit pause. I'm going to resave the file and be able to export it out as a WGS coordinate system versus the projected here, which is a meters based one. So give me 1 second. So as you can see here, if I just scroll, and this is the new file, at the bottom here you can see it's in our degrees versus the meters that we had. If we open the attribute table again, we're going to see the block group still has the same unique ID number. Now with that, if you don't have access to an ArcGIS software or some type of just GIS, not Arc or Esri specific, the Census does allow you to download KML or shape files. If you're downloading the KML files, they do have different names. Keep in mind this is all through the EPA and not the Census, so you'll have to go through the variable names, the code book, and get a feel for that. So what I'm speaking about, let me see here, new window, is if we do, and I still go to Google first, Census, Tiger Line, Files. If you bring up just the Tiger ones itself, this is a pretty cool one if you're not familiar with selected demographic. That pulls in some of your ACS data for you. But if you need to download data, and specifically when it comes to shapefile or boundary files itself, if we went back a couple years, say 2018, go to the web interface, we'll have a couple options. So let's go to 2018. We're interested in block groups. Can hit submit, and then we can download it for an entire state, which is cool. Just keep in mind you might only have data then for Birmingham, and you have to specify that. There's a couple other ways to do it. I'm just going to come back here. Depending on what you're wanting to get into, you have different options itself in terms of what you want to download and display. That's where I say take some time, go through some of the data itself, because if you come down here, you can see your KML, your boundary files themselves, or if you just want a shapefile and use it with that, you can do the same thing. So all I did was go up to mapping files, went to 2018 because I've already played with this for Arkansas. And you can download the KML here. So keep in mind it's going to ask you for a specific region or geography that they want you to select with then you can download from there. Here you would be interested in block groups, so you'd have to select by state, and here you'd have to do Alabama, and then you would download all of the block groups for Alabama, and then you can just unzip the file and still bring it up within Excel. And when you only have matching category or matching unique values, then it will display that data, and there's a couple ways you can just go through and code it so you can remove those if need be. But with that, I've already gone through from the GIS perspective, so I'm not going to go into it this way. If anyone's interested in this way, let me know. I can always make a video focused specifically on that. But back to it. So here we still have our boundary files. If I change this to how it was prior and we zoom in, we can still see it's still Birmingham. Still have some of the same areas that were displayed last time. But now we have a working boundary file. You can see that there's no other information in it, so we need to merge or join data to this. So we have that in Excel already. We just need to use this boundary file to actually visualize and see it. So with that, you can minimize this or just reopen our Excel file that we're working in. Keep in mind, we have the same name, but it's missing the leading 0. So I'm going to go ahead and do an insert, and I need to keep it the same name, so BGRP, and with that it's going to be in a concatenate, and as you can see I now have Office 365, so it changes some of your functions or formulas that you want to use within it. I'm still getting the hang of it because I just changed this weekend. I found out my tablets are different than my desktop. So depending on which one I was using, varied. So since I can't actually click B1 here, I'm just going to type it, or it actually needs to be B2. There we go. So you can see now I just added the 0 in, and it's going to match. So when I bring up Pro again, remember same variable name up here, B block group. So we have BGRP, BGRP, and here, since I made that through a concat function, I'm going to copy and paste the values. I can go ahead and get rid of this one since I don't need it now. Now we can get into, I'm going to change this to acute respiratory symptoms. I'm just going to take out the 03 part of it. And this was cases per year avoided based on the tree cover. So that just gives a quick idea what's going on. Highlight the entire data, go up to insert, and here's when I want to do a 3D map. And as you can see, since I did update what Office package I was working with, there are changes here. So that's where, if you haven't done that yet, like I had, and it's going to take you a couple minutes probably to make sense of everything that's moved, some of the new additions. But for the most part, everything is still in the same place. A couple new additions that are handy, and we'll get to those in other videos. Yeah. Similar to before, give this a few seconds to open up. I'm going to hit pause and just let that load. Alright, we have our field list here, and you can see we only have 2 measures. So those are essentially our variables of interest. With that, when we have location, typically we have our lat, long, XY coordinates, city, state, county, full address. You have a lot of options there, but block, group, and track are currently not 2 of your options. So with that, you need to do a custom region. With that, say I want to add location and I want it to be our block group. So that's our unique ID. With that, go to select, and it's going to be our custom, and this gives you the option to select a KML or shape file. I'm going to go ahead and select our shape file that we just made, or I just put into a world geographic system, import it, yes. I'm just going to direct it to where I saved it. Hopefully I remember exactly where it is. There we go. I'm going to open that. It's going to import it. Region name from, and this is where you want it to match the one that you just picked from. So you want your region name or regions and the location to have the same variable name. With this, I'm just going to change the top to be block groups Birmingham. Oops. I'm going to hit import. So with that, you can see it, since it has a coordinate system attached to it and it's in the WGS, the World Geographic System, it knows where it is. So it makes it easier, and that's why the projected coordinate systems can create trouble with it. But I'm going to zoom in here. So as I zoom in, it's going to give you the centroid or the center point for each block group. Remember, when you're trying to display data, you can come over here through visualize through region. If I change that, it now gives us our block groups, so our neighborhoods themselves, and you can click on each one, and it gives you the custom card. So you can see here data card itself to where you know that unique ID. With that, you can merge then a lot of data into this, or not even merge, display it based on your value or category. And that allows you to visualize a lot more at the neighborhood level without having to access another GIS type program. This is why I like this setup and ability to do it. It might take a little time and effort when it comes to getting files in the right coordinate system or World Geographic System, but they do give you options. It just takes a bit more time when it comes to cleaning and identifying what you want to display. So with that, I'm going to add some map labels and just let you see it a bit more. With that, I personally like the darker themes. As you can tell, when I do most of my displays, they're black. So with this, the value that I want to add now is the acute respiratory symptoms based on the tree coverage and avoided incidents. So you can see here that it's shifted some, but I'm going to change the color. We see our high, low for the 1 year cases per year avoided based on the tree cover. And if you're wondering where I got that from, if we come back here and go to our description, the map estimates the annual number of acute respiratory symptom cases that may be avoided due to the total ozone removed by trees in each census block group. So that gives you an idea of where we're pulling it from, and it's cases per year based on acute respiratory symptoms avoided. So with that, if we I'm going to change a couple of the colors here just so it's a bit easier to see. With that, you can see now that there is variation across. So we have our low to high values. Now this is where it is interesting. If you have categories, it lets you change some of your data points within it. For this one, it's not going to display too well, but if we get into it, or if you want to, let me hit the X there and say we did it based on category and we still left it acute respiratory. It gives you options based on the shading, based on the category within each location. So this is where if it was a specific county or a city, you could do it based on that. This one now gives each one a different color scheme itself. So you can see there's a multitude of different colors within it. With that, it's not important for us here. It doesn't really help us. We're more interested in the value point. And keep in mind, we do have it at region. You could change it and just do a stacked column. Again, so you can see the changes based on the height of a column itself, where more cases are avoided than that. So that's one way to display information. With that, you might be interested to then say you have a map and it's like, well, I want to see multiple parts or multiple things at the same time. This is where we can add in different layers. So within our data itself, we actually had a lot of population characteristics that came up that we haven't done anything with. So when we look at our Birmingham, we have pop and we have a couple different pop measures. So if we come back to kind of our data code book in general, we can scroll down to some of these and see what they refer to. And let me just move this over here. Let me go back to the top to make sure we don't pass any. Here we go. So we're starting to get some population ones. Let's see what this one looks like. So this map estimates the percent of total population that resides within 500 meters of a park entrance within each census boundary. So let's look to see what book that was in, park population, and then we want then the IWDP. All right, so with that, I'm just going to do a couple quick housekeeping items within the workbook itself. So when we bring in other data, we can at least make sure it's in the right setup. All right, so again, we're in our main working book that we're making the 3D tour map from. You can see here they're already arranged in a specific order. That's really what I was double checking here to make sure I don't have to change anything. With that, sorry, I was trying to go to the folder, and there was Park Pop that I was interested in. Again, this one's still in CSV, but since we're just copying out of this one, we don't have to worry about changing it at the moment. And we wanted the population. Oops. As you can see here, we actually have the percent, which makes our life easier. So we're going to go ahead and pull the percent. And if you remember correctly, this is where we're pulling this from and why it matters. So again, it's still on a 2010-2011 year, so we're good to go there. And it's again only giving us the map estimate, the percent of total population that resides within 500 meters of a park entrance for each block group, so each neighborhood. So what percentage of that neighborhood is within 500 meters of a park entrance? So we can see here just at first glance, and knowing these files all came from the same source, if you're worried about it, you could put them in sort of an ascending order or descending order to make sure they are. Based at first glance and knowing the data itself, I know it is in the correct order. So I'm just going to copy this row here, which is our percentage within the entrance of a park. We're going to hit enter there. And now we have our percentage. I'm going to change the decimal places. Oops. It's not letting me because I had the top one highlighted. So just the data ones itself. There we go. So here, park entrance percent, 500 meters. So the percent of the neighborhood population that's within 500 meters of a park entrance. So cool, we now have a new measure, and it's going to go from 0 to the high, which we don't know yet. 92 is pretty high, so that's always a good sign. But let's take a look. If we come back to our map now, we want to update and refresh our data. We want to add more data to it. So that's where we have to start, is essentially add another layer, or with that, refresh our data or add to it. Again, I'm just going to highlight these three, or if you really want to do it, this is a way to do it, just this column. Go to Insert, 3D Map, add selected data to your 3D map, So you're just adding a new layer to it. So again, going to pull up, and this is going to be our park entrance within 500 meters. But the location, oops, if you remember correctly, should have been set to the block group. And I'm selecting the wrong one, obviously, but block group. And here we want it to still be our custom region. Still zooming in with that, but the height for this one's going to be based on, if you notice what I did here, since I only brought it in, wait a sec, now I know what I did. So let's see here, I want to turn this one off. So we have our block groups visually here. For layer 2, since I only brought in the block group, or really the field itself that was the percent within the 500 meters, it still needs a location for both of those. So a trick to get around this would then be, so I don't need this one, so I can exit out, don't save, is to copy this column, paste it here, and then I'm going to copy both of those and go to Insert, Add to Select Map. So now it still has the geographic identifier. I can get rid of layer 2 now because that's not as important. But here, Add Field, and you can see that I have the block group ID option again. So again, I can connect it through the KML. And if we zoom in, we can see the points here. Changing it over so it displays as an area. Just change it up so you can see it. But now my value is going to be based on the park entrance, so the percent of. So the darker the color, the greater percent of that neighborhood block group within 500 meter of a park entrance. It's not bad. You can see some variation there. Can't see a whole lot. What I'd honestly recommend doing is breaking your data into categories and displaying it that way. You might do the top 10 to 20% and just show that, or just split it into quantiles or quintiles, just to make it a bit easier in Excel to visualize and see. So you have breakpoints. But with that, you can layer, since you can see here that I only have, or I'm displaying one part. If I hit the eye on the other one, you can start to see visually then, if you have multiple data sets and you want to display them together, potentially where there's correlation. And with that, you're not testing it exactly. You can do correlations in Excel, and you can see some of my other videos with that. But you can see at the base level park entrance, the sum is 3%, with the case presented around 17 to 18 within that. But that, keep in mind, is not based on population. It's just cases per year. But it gives you some cool ideas to actually display your data and play around with at the neighborhood level, which is oftentimes a struggle outside of GIS-based programs. This is just one example of how to use data that are openly available from here, the US government, and display it. So with that, I did have to transform or project the data from a projected coordinate system in meters specific to Birmingham to a World Geographic WGS 84, so Excel would read it in. Again, if that's an issue for you, go through the US Census and use their Tiger mapping files and download the boundary files as specifically to a KML or shapefile. Yes, you'll likely have to do it for the entire state, but if your data only reflects a certain city, it'll show that within. When you get into your layer options, you can handle show values for negatives or zeros or nulls. That's where you can change and turn on or off those specific areas. So with that, if there's any questions, please reach out to me. If not, hopefully this video wasn't too bad and caught you off guard. Again, take care. Cheers. Bye.